This era has come to an end in the history of the European Union. The decision you mentioned, to bypass Hungary, to violate in broad daylight and in public European laws, and to seize Russian assets while circumventing Hungary, hurts us primarily because it marks the end of the illusion that the rule of law prevails in Brussels. Admittedly, the interpretation of the law has always been in their hands up until now. But at least you couldn't just close the founding documents and toss them aside, yet that's exactly what's happening now. However, from another perspective, beyond the Hungarian point of view, this decision is extremely significant. This is a declaration of war. Tampering with the Russian assets, the frozen Russian assets, and expropriating them, this is a declaration of war. I have never seen anything like this before, where 200 or 300 billion euros are taken from a country without provoking some kind of response. That just doesn't happen. Because people might let it go if a small amount of their money is taken, but when an entire country is plundered, that cannot be allowed. So we are in a very serious moment, and you are undoubtedly correct in your observation that we are now holding war-related rallies almost every week, but none of them are boring, and none are the same as the previous one, because something always happens. The conditions and situations are deteriorating at such a speed. I would sometimes use a Russian term, if you allow me, since earlier I spoke about understanding complicated things. You probably hear a lot about it, but you might not know what it actually is. You see, the international practice in peacetime is that every country has foreign currency reserves. This means that you have your own currency, like we Hungarians have the forint, but the forint, of course, is not accepted if we want to pay in other countries, so we convert part of our assets into currencies that are accepted abroad. Mostly into dollars or euros, and in the event that our currency loses value, we can use these reserves through complex operations to protect the forint. This is what we call foreign exchange reserves. Every country has them. And according to international financial regulations, you generally, and in fact obligatorily, cannot keep these reserves in your own country. So foreign exchange reserves must always be held in another safe country. Of course, it's hard to imagine that now, while the Russians are negotiating with the Americans, and there's more than 200 billion euros on the table, then the well-trained Russian president, equipped with the right knowledge, of course, from the old world, and one of the world's best businessmen, are negotiating with each other, while 200 billion euros are just lying there, ownerless, left on the table. What I mean by this is that one of the key issues in the Russian-American negotiations is what should happen to this money. In fact, the Russians and the Americans have even agreed with each other. They have already made arrangements about what should happen to this money. There are publicly released documents about this, so I'm not saying this because I'm peeking through the keyhole, but because there are written documents. And in this, the Europeans were not given a seat at the table. Moreover, it's no coincidence that the Europeans are clinging to this sum of money, because the Europeans, if you'll pardon the expression, have been feeding their own citizens with this for years now in Spain. That we will finance the war from Russian assets. The Europeans believe this. Of course, we Hungarians did not believe it. We've seen things like this before. No sensible person would believe such a thing, but Westerners are not like us. They don't have the same education in the subject called weathering historical storms. That's why they believe it. They believe things like this. Now it turns out that the monkey jumps into the water. Now the European leaders have to admit that you will pay for the war. Until now, we said no, but if this money isn't there, you will pay for the war from Denmark to Portugal. And not only will you pay now, but even your grandchildren will pay, because we've taken out loans that we can't repay, and the interest on those, and all of that will have to be paid. Your children will pay for it. This is what's about to come to light. That's why the entire European elite is in a state of fear, from the German Chancellor down to the Slovenian Prime Minister, because the truth will come out. And when it comes out, and there really isn't that money, and it really can't be paid from that, but you have to reach into your own pocket, that will be a disgrace for the people. Although they're so German that they're already among us, aren't they? So, in fact, they are basically already us. But in reality, it's 3 Germans who are leading the way here. And I think they're steering the Union onto a dead-end track or driving it into a wall. The German Chancellor, the largest group in the European Parliament, the faction leader, Mr. Weber, and Ursula von der Leyen, who is the president of the Commission. This is a German matter. And they think, well, either the Russian money is there or it isn't. And either the war ends or it doesn't. And if it doesn't end, then more money will be needed. And money will have to be sent to Ukraine from somewhere in a way that doesn't cause a political earthquake at home. That's why I can never say, they say, let's pool the money that goes to Ukraine. I always say this, people If we want to finance the war, then let's get out the papers and pencils. Let's calculate how much the Germans, the Belgians get and see if you can chip in, or if you even want to chip in. But that's not what they do. Instead, they say they'll collect some funds and use these as collateral for loans.
The topic, Mr. Deputy, is whether we will give Ukraine 145 billion euros for the war.
Discussions on this topic are taking place ahead of next week's European Council. And
The position I will represent at next week's European Council meeting is a position that may not be approved by the entire National Council, but I absolutely stand by this position. You will find everything in this letter. I will quote exactly as I wrote the letter. Dear President of the European Council, dear Antonio, allow me, through this letter, to express my position regarding the recent proposals of the European Commission to secure Ukraine's financial needs for the years 2026 and 2027, including the use of frozen Russian assets, in order to avoid any misunderstandings or doubts. I have long and unequivocally expressed my positions regarding the military conflict in Ukraine. This conflict has no military solution. The European Union's strategy towards the conflict is wrong and ineffective, and the continuation of the war is nothing but senseless killing without strengthening Ukraine's position. In the case of peace negotiations, 20,000 people die on each side every month for no reason. That is why I repeatedly express strong support for all peace initiatives. In these weeks, I am especially referring to the efforts of President Donald Trump. Mr. Chairman, without commenting on the advantages, disadvantages, or risks of the individual solutions proposed by the European Commission, I state very clearly that I am not in a position to support, at the upcoming European Council, any solution to Ukraine's financial needs that would include covering Ukraine's military expenditures for the coming years. He is not seeking it.
Mr. Member, Mr. Prime Minister,
Regarding the risks associated with the use of frozen Russian assets,
Mr. Matovich, please respect the Prime Minister's personal space. I think that's fair.
by forming these clear positions, I want to eliminate any misunderstanding or unwarranted expectation that the length of the session in Brussels could change my stance. I cannot support, and under no pressure will I support, any solution to fund Ukraine's military expenditures in which the Slovak Republic would participate. At the same time, I respect the sovereign right of every European Union member state to adopt a different solution on a voluntary basis, with respect. Robert Fico, this is the position I will represent at the European Council.